to the Monday episode of the Dollar Bandits. It's Oren Phillips, and we have a great week of shows coming up for you. And we're starting off today with Barbara Slate. You might know Barbara from Yuppies from Hell, Angel Love, Miss Liz. She's done numerous works for DC and Marvel, independent creator as well. She's absolutely amazing. This was such a fun conversation to hear her perspective on, hey, her career, but also the industry. A lot of great insight. And like I said, I just had a blast doing this one. So I hope you enjoyed as well. Here's Barbara Slate with Barbara Slate. Barbara, thank you so much for taking the time.
You are the luckiest man in the world. Here I am.
Best day ever. So let's start at the beginning. How do you discover comic books?
I discovered comics through the funnies, actually. You know, when I was young, I read those wonderful pages, colored pages of funnies.
Mhm.
And that was wonderful. But I didn't discover comics until I worked for DC. I was doing greeting cards,
Mhm.
Ms. Liz feminist greeting cards.
Mhm.
And I took them to Jeanette Kahn, and she hired me to do something, and I did Angel Love, and that's how I discovered. But actually, I started reading Betty and Veronica when I was at camp, so I guess that was the beginning.
And was there a decision made in your life to get into comics? You mentioned Miss Liz. Was that the doorway you needed to get into comics, or did you have an idea about before that? How do I find my foot in the door there?
You know, everything seems to just happen organically with me. I don't say, oh, I want to do comics, or oh, I want to do Ms. Liz. It happens I'm doing Ms. Liz, and then I was doing it for about 9 years.
Mhm.
And Ms. Liz I went on the Today Show with Ms. Liz as an animated character, and she became pretty famous through Cosmopolitan magazine. And then after 9 years, I was in business with my husband, and we were getting a divorce, and it was time to it was too much. The business was too much. And and I remember I was lying on my couch, kind of depressed,
Mhm.
you know, feeling like, oh, what has happened to me? You know, I'm 40 and I'm getting divorced and my business is gone. And the phone rang, and it was a friend of my husband's, actually. And he said, well, how are you? And I said, I'm miserable.
Mhm.
And he says, well, what's going on? And I told him, and he says, oh, you should call Jeanette Kahn from DC Comics. And you know, well, I don't know how you are, but when you're depressed, you're not calling anybody. But I got up and I had to go to the store because at the time I was smoking, I was out of cigarettes.
Mhm.
So I go to the store and I'm buying a pack of cigarettes, and I look over and there I see Jeanette Kahn and Superman on the cover of a magazine.
Mhm.
And I said, okay, there's that sign. There's a sign. So I went back and I made the phone call, and I met with Jeanette, and the rest is history. She was interested in doing a girl's line, and I came at the perfect time.
So before DC with Miss Liz, what's the genesis of that? How does that all begin? And were you surprised by how quickly it caught on?
I was surprised. It
Okay.
was the first greeting card that it was a feminist greeting card,
Mhm.
and that's why it caught on. There was a lot of interest in that. Feminism was beginning, and you know, and the cards were funny. You know, if my place is in the home, then get out. Things like that. They were kind of. It was funny, but it took a while before I got a line that really sold, because I had to realize that a lot of the cards that I wrote that were funny, women did not want to send to their boyfriends or their husbands. So they'd laugh, but they'd put it back on the rack and then buy a Hallmark card, you know, I love you, sweetheart. So it was very tricky
Mhm.
of how the cards that were kind of in between, that they were funny enough of a punch,
Mhm.
and uh and something they'd want to put a stamp on and put in the mail. But I got a lot of attention because of those cards were very strong.
Right.
So
And you mentioned the notoriety. Does notoriety come with more pressure on you to keep them coming and, to make them each one a little more different?
Each line, every time I put out a line, it wasn't about notoriety. Once I had the formula,
Mm.
I was able to put out a line. And by the time, it took a long time before I got a line of 96 greeting cards
Wow.
that would hold in a rack that would sell. So there was a period of time where it was selling really, really well.
Mhm.
And then, then the seasons would come with Valentine's Day and blah, blah, blah,
Right.
blah, blah, blah.
So let's talk about that phone call with Jeanette Kahn. Uh, what was that like? And was it right off the bat you guys had chemistry and she invited you to come aboard?
Have you ever met Jeanette?
No.
She's to me, she was like a superhero.
Okay.
I went into DC and
Mhm.
they said, "Oh, go all the way down the hall, and there she is on the left, and blah blah blah." So I'm sorry for the blah blah blah. I'm just
No,
filling
that's
it. I'm just picturing myself walking down that hall, and then there she is standing there in this red outfit and with the big earrings, and you walk into her office, and it's like a pop Korea of everything, Wonder Woman's there. It was fabulous. So we sat down and talked, and she told me that she said it's 95% boys who read comics. This was in the 90s.
right.
I may look young, but I'm actually kind of getting up there. And and she said she wants to change that. So 95% boys and 5% girls, and she wanted to change that. And she saw the fact that I had done Ms. Liz and had a success with it. She saw that as a a good that I was a good person to create a comic book for girls,
Mhm.
which I did. But I really knew very little about comics. I knew Betty and Veronica.
Right.
That was pretty much it. Um, so it was a wonderful place to get started because I worked with Karen Berger. She was my editor,
Mhm.
and she was terrific. And but I did not know how to plot.
Uh,
So after about three or four um, submissions, and Karen, Karen has long blonde hair, and she would twirl. She would say, "Oh, I'm really sorry." And by the third time, if I hadn't felt so sorry for myself, I would have felt sorry for her because she was sad that it wasn't working.
gotcha.
So Jeanette got Dick
Mhm.
Giordano, and Paul Levis to teach me how to plot
Okay.
by color code, which I have it. It's all in my office. That was the answer to everything. Once I knew how to plot by color code, then I knew how to plot. And that's what I teach. I do a lot of teaching. So I teach how to plot by color code. It was the greatest lesson of my life. And it took about an hour and a half. And I remember walking out of there and going into Central Park because Paul and Dick were, they were like, you the main plot goes on top, and then some of the plots can go in the third ish. It was like blah blah. I had no idea what they were talking about, but you know how something all of a sudden hits you.
Mhm.
So I was walking in Central Park, and I thought, oh, well, that's it for me for comics, because I have no idea what the are you my allowed to swear?
Sure.
Oh, no idea what the fuck they were talking about.
Right.
And sure enough, it was like the clouds parted, and all of a sudden the sun came out, and I saw everything clearly.
Wow.
So I could go home, and that's when I started plotting. Plotted the Angel of for 15 issues,
Right.
and that's how I did it. It was just that lesson really showed me how to do comics.
So when you're doing that book, what was the blueprint in your mind to begin with? How did you want to create the character? And then your mind, did you have a whole story arc laid out? Or were you going issue by issue just to see where you thought it was going to go?
No, no, no. I had to know where it was going
Okay.
because it's about a girl who comes to New York. But it was kind of when I was 20, I got on a Greyhound bus and came to New York. And I remembered that feeling of sitting in that bus, of being happy, excited, terrified,
Right.
hopeful, hopeless, all those emotions. And so I took that all that angst and I put it into this girl who's coming to New York.
Mhm.
But she had a different background, of course, than I did. Her sister ran away from home, and uh, she did not have her whole background, of course, was very different, but the emotion was there. So I could go from there. I knew that character very well.
And how many issues or did it take for you to sort of feel confident, like, okay, I made the right decision. This is where I belong, and I'm going to see this thing through.
Oh, I was thrilled from the moment I started.
Nice.
I I don't know if I felt that I belonged, but I was like, wow, this is so exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you saw the books in the comic shops or you saw people reading them for the first time, what kind of thrill was that for you seeing that now?
It was thrilling. But the comics, I didn't see the comics until I went into this shop and bought it. So I was a roller skater.
Okay.
I skated everywhere. I'd get up in the morning and put on my skates. I just skated through my apartment, down up and down steps. I roller skated all the time.
Right.
Went to the Roxy every Wednesday. Anyway, so I roller skated to this comic book store. I remember going in
Mhm.
and I said to the woman, I said, "Did Angel Love come in yet?" And she said, "Yes, and I know what you mean." And I never told her that it was my comic, but that was always exciting to see that somebody else was excited about my comic. Yeah.
That's wonderful. And just overall, what was your experience of DC like? Because you hear people say that DC was a little more buttoned up, a little more corporate, maybe than Marvel. Did you have that same experience, or was it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. You walk down the DC halls and the doors are shut and people, it was very buttoned up. And Marvel, the guys are crazy, they're hanging out from the walls and it's totally different, totally different. And it's a different vibe. So you go into Jeanette's office, and it's beautiful and it's all she's got this antique. I don't know if it's antique, but it looks antique furniture and plants and it's beautiful. You go into Tom DeFalco's office, first he's sharing it with Grunwald, and the two of them are like, papers all over the place, and Tom goes, "Welcome to my palace." It's a totally different thing.
So, how do you make the jump over to Marvel to start doing Barbie?
I made the jump because Angel Love got taken off the stands.
Mhm.
It was drug, sex, and rock and roll, and it became too controversial. And I was going to ruin the comic book industry. I had no idea this was going on until I started reading articles about me. You
Wow.
know, it was very, very, it
I was
was very strange. I talked about abortion and I talked about drugs.
right.
And but Jeanette was the one that really pushed that. And I was thrilled she did. But then anyway, I got taken off the stands and I was unemployed for a while.
Mhm.
But I loved doing comic books.
Right.
So I made my cold calls in the morning and mostly we don't do comics for girls.
Mhm.
Um, I remember one time I called this company and I said, "Hi, I'm Barbara Slate and I did Angel Off," and they go, "Barbara Slate? No, unequivocally no," and hung up on me. And I thought, wow, I have some reputation. How exciting. But and then I went to a comic convention. Gary Cohn, who was a friend of mine,
Mhm.
called and said, he said, "Foxy Fox, well, something of the kingdom.
Mhm.
You write, you draw and I'll write." And I said, "Okay." So we did this comic and then we did this we spent a lot of time, creating characters, and we thought it was fabulous.
Right.
So we went to Chicago, and there we saw Tom, who
Mhm.
was looking at portfolios, and went over and said, "Oh, we've got this wonderful thing that we want you to see." And he went, "Well, I'll meet you at the hotel in the coffee shop." So
Mhm.
we went there, and very excited. And Tom looked at our presentation for maybe 45 seconds and said, "This is the weirdest thing I've ever seen." And he handed it back to us. And we're like, I'm like, uh, that's it? That and then he's getting up to leave. This is my meeting. And I, I said to him, as he's almost out the door, I said, "Is Marvel ever going to do a line for girls?"
Right.
And he said, he looked around, he says, "Call me in the city. I'm thinking about it." So that's what I did. I called him, I guess once a month. I put it on my calendar. I called him once a month for about 6 months.
Okay.
Um, and I showed him, I kept pitching all these ideas.
Right.
And he was, not getting it. And then finally, when I had given up all hope, I had a project with Trina Robbins. The two of us put
Mhm.
together a comic, and how could he refuse? The only two women who are doing mainstream comics. How could he say no? And he said no. So, so I said to him, "Look, Tom, I get it. You're not doing girls comics. I appreciate the efforts." But he said, "No, no, no. I was actually thinking of a comic for girls for the 21 and over. Would you like to write and draw it?" And I went, "Yeah." And so that became Yuppies from Hell. Are
Okay.
you familiar with Yuppies from Hell?
Yes.
So that was a 3-part, 45-page comic that kept me busy for a long time. That was, getting up in the morning and just eavesdropping all over the city, because I was just in New York City and there were yuppies everywhere. So I eavesdropped, and was able to write this comic of yuppies, and so much fun. Had
What
a great time.
what was your opinion of Yuppies?
Well, me being one, I thought they were fabulous. But it was the time where, people were, where money was everything,
Yes.
and I wrote about these. I wrote about relationships, and I would see this guy crying
Mhm.
in Central Park because his kid did not get into the UN school. His kid was 3,
Mm.
and he was actually crying, and I felt so sorry for the little boy, because here he was,
Yeah.
this little kid, 3 years old, who his father already thought was a failure. But that then I thought, oh, that's a great idea to do something where the women are in vitro. There are all these pregnant women trying to get their kid into this school.
Mhm.
This it was Hale Preschool,
Mhm.
and the kids were all they all had earphones, and they were learning math and English.
Mhm.
It was fun. I did That was one, and there was. I overheard a conversation where this guy says, "I think my relationship with what's her name is really getting serious." I thought, you couldn't. I could not have dreamt that line. But that turned into two very popular characters, Joe and Julie, who only wants to get. Of course, you need a conflict, so she only wanted to get married,
Mhm.
and he was he didn't know how to get out of it. But so things like that. But that was Yuppies from Hell was so much fun. And then Tom called me into his office and said, "How do you feel about doing Barbie?" And I went, "Are you kidding me?" So absolutely.
Yeah.
But a lot of my friends, my feminist friends, were angry with me. Like,
Mhm.
"Barbie, you went from Ms. Liz to an angel love to Barbie," but we made Barbie a feminist. We had Hildy Mesnick as our editor, who was fabulous, and she put together all these women who were thrilled to be doing comics and thrilled to be writing and drawing for Marvel. So I love doing Barbie. I did 65 Barbie comics
Yeah.
every month.
I
Love.
want to jump into Barbie for a second, but I'm just wondering when you're doing the Yuppies from Hell, after what happened with Angel Love with DC, them saying, this is just too much. Were you ever gun shy at all doing Yuppies from Hell, thinking that it could happen with Marvel might be like, listen, we don't, this might not be something we want to put out there, or because they said, okay, this is for the 21 and over, you said, okay, I can really tell the story I want to tell.
Yeah, I was getting paid.
Mhm.
That I needed to make a living.
Yeah.
I had this great apartment. I needed to make a living. I needed to make money.
Mhm.
So I didn't have the time to sit like, oh, what do I want to do? I mean, I love doing it, but
Right.
there was no really, uh, I just really love doing comics. I guess I could have gotten a job as a Walmart greeter or something. I would rather do comics.
With Barbie, because it was so popular and it's a licensed property, were you getting a lot of notes from Mattel telling you sort of the direction they wanted the things to go, or you kind of given a little more free reign as to tell the stories?
Well, we were under Hildy. Hildy was the one that really pushed Barbie
Mhm.
into being could live anywhere,
Mhm.
she could be anything. So every month, let's make Barbie an astronaut. Let's make Barbie. So I would just go around the city, and I went to I just would walk into places, like I walked into the Center for Book Arts, and they were teaching bookbinding.
Mhm.
Let's make Barbie a bookbinder. And so wherever I was, Barbie could be and do anything. So it was wonderful.
Mhm.
And I remember we went to a Mattel meeting, and they said Barbie, the comic book Barbie is the way they wanted all their licensees to see Barbie. They loved our work. And we did not talk down at all to Barbie. The only thing that was with Barbie that was difficult was she could never make a mistake. But all the characters around her could make plenty of mistakes. However, she did. I made one mistake, and it went through. I don't know whether they caught it or not, but Barbie was sending a Valentine to Ken,
Okay.
and she put the envelope in the wrong. She put the card in the wrong envelope,
Right.
so it went to somebody else, and Ken was feeling a little rejected. So that was the mistake that Barbie made. And I was so thrilled that I made Barbie make a mistake, 'cause I felt sorry for her. Who
Yeah.
wants to be perfect? That was the thing that with Betty and Veronica too,
Mhm.
those girls they made lots of mistakes.
Right.
And I was reaching that young girl who, women and young girls have problems being perfect, trying to be perfect.
Mhm.
So I wanted to humiliate Betty and Veronica as much as possible,
Right.
and then see how they came out of it, so the girls could see that their characters make mistakes.
Right.
So Barbie, that was the big difference between Barbie and Betty, for instance. As sweet and lovely as both of them were,
Mhm.
Betty could make mistakes.
Right.
Yeah.
What's the way to write for a younger audience? Because you went from writing for, an older audience to now a younger audience. Did you change your style at all? And how do you write so that it's not going over children's heads, but you're not speaking down to them either?
Well, my age in my head is 11-year-olds.
Okay.
And so I don't write down. I can't write down for anyone, even with it's really not that different. Once you're a girl,
Mhm.
you wouldn't know this, but once you're a girl, you're 11 years old, you start feeling a little bit older.
Mhm.
I don't, it did not, there was not that big of a shift for me, really.
I want to talk because we mentioned it before air. I just want to touch on it briefly, just because I think there's two very fascinating points about it. And I mentioned before the New Kids on the Block. Um, First, I just wondering, what was your experience like at Harvey? Because I really haven't spoken to a lot of people who work for Harvey Comics. I know this is sort of towards the end years for them, but how did you enjoy your time at Harvey?
When you say your time at Harvey, of course I never went there. You sit in your studio and you write and draw. Every once in a while I was able to go to Marvel. Every once in a while I went to DC. I was somebody would take me to lunch and that was exciting.
Mhm.
But you spend all your time by yourself. So writing for New Kids on the Block was writing with Sid Jacobson. I mean, he was a great editor, and
Mhm.
so I loved writing for him.
Right.
But there was nothing that was new there. I mean, I didn't say, oh, Harvey was different because of this or that. He just sent in the scripts. They said, go with it or not, and that was it.
As far as licensing goes, because these were actual people, and real life folks, did they sign off a lot on likeness stuff and the way the story was going and how they were portrayed in the comics, or it was just another way for them to put
I,
themselves out there?
I think they probably did sign off. I know they had a manager who was on top of it.
Okay.
But that was with Sid and whoever was, I don't even know who was in charge of Harvey at that time,
Hmm.
but whoever it was, it didn't affect me at all.
Gotcha.
Sid would say, I did the writing, I didn't do the drawing. Jerry and I worked together, and Jerry Craft and I worked together on that. He did put
Right.
drawings and we worked together.
Okay.
So that's but it's you go to comic conventions, and that's where you meet your fans, and
Mhm.
that's where I meet all my Barbie fans. These girls come up and say, oh, every month I got your comic, and that is thrilling. But
Yes.
at the time you don't meet anybody. You can read the letters, and that's where you get your thrills of your fans. But it's really just really being alone in your studio. You have to really like being alone.
I was
It's
going to say, it sounds
yeah,
like it could be sort of lonely at times. You're sort of there, just you and your thoughts and your imagination, putting these stories together.
absolutely. Absolutely. You have a mirror and you look in, you say hello. You look familiar.
Would you have liked though? We hear so much about the Marvel bullpen and all that stuff. Would you have liked that experience better though, to be in the office surrounded by people and folks just throwing?
I'm a girl. It was all boys when I started.
If it was a little
I wouldn't know but just be in that bullpen. I would not fit in. No, I'd rather not.
you mentioned before, you worked on Betty and Veronica. What this is that they're iconic comic book characters.
Yeah,
The whole Archie universe.
yeah. It's
It's
something.
really folks don't talk about it. We talk about the DCU and the MCU, but the Archie universe is right there with it, with so
Yeah,
many characters, been around for so long.
yeah.
What take did you want to? You mentioned a little bit before about making them, more, to say human, but what take did you want to bring to those two characters?
That chair looks ridiculous here.
You could say it's a haunted chair.
I should have set up better. Um, uh, Betty and Veronica, I just wanted them to stop fighting over that ridiculous redhead. I was like, enough. I didn't like the idea that these two girls were fighting over him. So I really worked on stories that was about their friendship,
Mhm.
and they were very different. So there was enough conflict there, and how they were great friends, and they loved the same boy for over 80 years,
Yeah,
which, uh,
it's quite a while.
that's a lot. And, but I remember calling Victor Gorlick, and saying, you got to tell me about Archie, because I don't get him. I don't get why these two fabulous girls are in love with him.
Mhm.
Oh, he got so offended. Archie's this and Archie's that. And, he loved Archie.
Right.
And but I couldn't get that character. And the thing of getting characters, if I have a go-to person, like I knew one of my friends was Veronica, I mean, through and through.
Right.
And I felt like I was more a Betty. So I could, I could go into my head, but Veronica, I had to just go right into her head.
Mhm.
And I could do that. And it was funny because she thought she was Betty, Veronica never thinks she's, and so I had the perfect person to go to.
Mhm.
And uh, so what happened with Archie was I've been living with the same man for, I guess it's 35 years now.
Mhm.
And one night he was coming with cocktails, coming towards me, and he was kind of suave and tripping over things. And I went, oh, that's Archie. So once I saw Archie as my boyfriend, who I love,
Right.
I started loving Archie. I started loving him and understanding why these girls loved him. And so he was a I could actually do Bell. I did Archie stories.
Right.
So I was doing Betty and Veronica stories, but then I started doing Archie stories.
Mhm.
And I did some, I'm gonna brag, but I did some wonderful Archie stories where he worked at an old age home. He was volunteering, and he started telling Jug how annoyed he was at himself because he spends so much time trying to figure out which girl he loves more, Betty and Veronica. And what a waste of time. There's certainly more in life to that. So I started getting into his head. And so he goes into this old age home and he meets Charlie Jordan. I guess that's his name. And Charlie's talking to him, and Charlie has the same problem. There are these two women that he loves. And so Archie's kind of coaching him on how to behave with keep these two girls in line.
Mhm.
Anyway, I started really enjoying Archie. But you have to know the character and be able to do their dialogue just by getting into that head.
You mentioned before, sort of the formula that was always there of the two of them fighting over Archie, or as you just said, Archie trying to figure out who he loves more. When you changed that formula, was there any pushback, A, from the people at Archie, or B, from the fans, or were they happy to see a fresh sort of take on these characters?
I think that, I was just at a convention and somebody mentioned that when they were introducing me and mentioned how different it was when I was
Mhm.
writing them. And I was so happy that there was recognition for that.
Right.
The stories of Betty and Veronica's friendship had enough meat in there
Right.
that it wasn't, nobody missed Archie. I didn't miss him.
At your, for your career, did you prefer art or writing more?
I the writing came very natural to me.
Okay.
And I went to art school, I went to the Art Institute of Pittsburgh, so I was always an artist.
Right.
But you go into Marvel or DC and you see the artists there and you want to kill yourself because they're so good.
Yeah.
And so I think I was a little intimidated. But the writing came very natural. So when I was asked to write Beauty and the Beast. And
Mhm.
I always sketched, I did the writing, but I love doing the layout. Layouts to me were fun, but to go in there and do the finals and do all that, that was hard. That was always hard. So I the writing was just natural. With Beauty and the Beast and Pocahontas.
Mhm.
Disney would give us the background scripts of who they were, and with Beauty and the Beast, I got that the the I'm drawing a blank. I got the video of the movie,
Okay.
and I watched it maybe 10, 15 times. And then all the characters were in my head and the voices, Lumiere and Cogsworth
Mhm.
in my head fighting for a couple years. So I was just kind of the muse because their accents were so clear.
Right.
And it's it's really fun to have characters like that where no matter what's going on in your life, you've got this whole little family in there, and you can go in with your little family in there and you can listen to them squabble. And I love doing Beauty and the Beast. We started out, Hildy said we have 4, and we ended up doing 12.
Wow.
It really worked out well. Disney really liked we had a great group. We had the artist, Cosmo, I forget, he was from Argentina. He
Mhm.
was brilliant. And so the colorist, everything about Beauty and the Beast was so beautiful. Because sometimes at the end, when you have 6 people to make a comic, sometimes you look and the lettering is off, the coloring was off. The writing was always fabulous, thank you.
Of course, that was good.
But, oh, whatever. And but sometimes I would open it up and I'd say of that, and I could never look at it again.
Really?
But with Beauty and the Beast, it was a thrill because everything was beautiful and perfect, and I love doing that.
You just brought up a really fascinating thing with your writing. Which artist did you work with that you really thought blended or meshed so well with what you were writing that the story just flowed so well with their art?
It was Stan Goldberg and Dan DeCarlo.
Okay.
But I was a 12-year-old girl in camp reading these books. I didn't know, nobody ever looks at that who's writing it, especially when you're, oh, that book, that Stan Goldberg really does a great, no, you just open it up and you forget about who's, the names.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I loved working with them, and they were my heroes when I was young. I didn't know that, but then when I got older, I said, oh, these are the guys that I read when I was 12 years old.
Right.
So working with them was thrilling. I did a comic with Stan Goldberg. The two of us worked together on a comic called Soho Zoe that, when you work with creative people, if you don't have somebody pushing it after the creativity's gone, then you're doing something else. And all of a sudden that project's pushed to the side. So I must have 12, 14, 15. I don't know how many projects that I've done with friends. And, this is great. And then nobody sells it.
Oh, yeah.
You need someone to sell it.
Oh, brother. Well, on that topic, what do you consider you at your best? If you were to look back and say this series or this comic or something, I was hitting it on all cylinders. If someone asked me what I did for a living, I'll show them this.
Well, I think I did a great job with Betty and Veronica. Those 2 girls, very dear to me, very, and I was very clear that there was a message for young girls. And I think Barbie, same thing, message, Beauty and the Beast. They were all, I think that was a period. It was only a period of 5 years where I was, really working constantly for Marvel. And I felt like I had really hit my stride there. And almost every one of those comics, I love them so much. Had they said, oh, we want you to continue, I would still be doing it today.
Yeah.
But and then I realized everything comes to an end. Did you know that?
I've heard these things.
It was a big shock to me. Really? It's over? Yeah.
I want to talk a little about, you mentioned before, teaching as well. How important has teaching been a part of your life?
Oh, it's been big. I taught, I still teach. I teach in schools and colleges, and I love teaching. And again, I pay the bills. I have to pay the bills. So I don't think I have ever turned down a job. I don't think so. I don't think there's ever a job where I said, no, I don't think so. Even today, if somebody, oh, sure, whatever, you have a job for me, I'll do it. And, it's really you never know where the next thing is coming, where the next thing's coming from. So with teaching, I would have a gig for a semester, or I would come into a school for 4 or 5 weeks and teach, a couple days a week. And some of the kids in these really tough areas just blossomed. And, the teacher would say, they'd come up and they'd talk about their work. they never come up in front and talked, but they at least was able to bring out things. So that was so rewarding. And I did that book on You Can Do a Graphic Novel
Mhm.
for schools. So I'd go teach there and they would buy the book, which was great. You know, I love teaching, and I love the I would teach third to fifth grade was always so exciting because these kids were so open and so happy to be doing a creative project, because these ridiculous tests
Yeah.
that they put these poor kids through. And the teachers would say, you know, they've just tested for a week, let's do something fun.
Mhm.
So that's what we did. I, yeah.
In another life, could you have seen yourself full time as a teacher?
Oh, I couldn't be a full-time teacher.
No.
These teachers go through. I love being there. I love being in the classroom.
Mhm.
But what they go through, I went to the school and, you know, came back from lunch and there was blood on the floor.
Oh
You know,
boy.
some kid had thrown something because one kid called him fat and the other kid called him racial thing,
Mhm.
and there's blood on the floor.
Yeah.
And this teacher is talking to me about what time the class is coming and cleaning up the blood.
Mhm.
This is what they do every day. 30 kids in a classroom, and the parents are, some of the parents are more difficult, because here I would say, let's invite all the parents and all the kids and we can do a show. And the teacher would say, we can do a show, but I'm not inviting the parents.
Mhm.
Crazy. So it was, you know, I couldn't do that on a daily basis. I admire teachers, and they should get paid really a lot of money
Yeah.
with what they put up with and what they do every day for these kids.
This is very true.
Yeah,
Was there a character or a book that you would have loved to have had a run on?
that I would have loved to work on.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I don't think I ever had a yearning to do. I never had a yearning to do a superhero.
Really?
Even Wonder Woman, as wonderful as she is. Superheroes were not for me. I liked characters that were based on reality and you know,
Right.
not so much fantasy even, you
Mhm.
know.
That's
My girls were very much based on you know, Betty and Veronica, Barbie, Belle. I love Belle. I love doing Belle.
Mhm.
But she was, you know, very smart. She loved to read. Didn't take anything from the beast.
Mhm.
You know, all these, you know, these things that you know about who they are
Right.
and how you can get into their heads. So no, I don't think so. If I think of someone, I'll let you know.
Any thoughts of ever going back to Angel Love and continuing that story, or
If they would call me, you know, everyone says, "Oh, why don't you do this? Why don't you?" I don't own it.
oh, okay.
I don't know any of that. I
What's
don't
that?
know any of those characters.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I am doing an autobiography
Oh, nice.
that I've been working on for a long time as a graphic novel, and I'm almost actually finished with the first 290 pages. It's been taking me a long time, and so I'm really enjoying that. And you know, I talk about you know, working at Marvel and DC, and um, coming to New York, what that was like, and
That's
you
awesome.
know, it's a very it's a story that is very relatable, and talk about feminism. And the first time I listened to Gloria Steinem and, you know, all that stuff. It's a very typical life, but I guess doing comics is not so typical. But it's uh, I'm I'm actually at a point where I'm halfway finished.
Okay.
That's 290. I've decided I got to do it in two books. So yeah.
When you're doing an autobiography like that, how do you decide what to put out there for the public and what just to keep for yourself?
I go back and forth a lot,
Okay.
and there's not much that I'm keeping to myself, you know. I wanted to be an inspirational story about a girl
Mhm.
from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Right.
Um, gets on that Greyhound bus that so much of us do, the small town girl comes to New York. And, strangely enough, when I was getting off the bus with my portfolio, there was this Mr. Sleaze guy going, "Hey, baby, you want to be a model?" You know, whoa, a model. But, I can see where you're like, oh, sure, let's go. So, I was only 20 getting off that bus, and, it was not easy in the beginning, trying to find a job and all that. So I worked for J.C. Penney as
Right.
a package designer,
Mhm.
and I just worked at a buying office and worked in the garment center and all that kind of thing. And then started Ms. Liz, and that changed everything.
Do you ever sit and think about the impact you had on so many lives, either from the work that you've done in comics or now teaching, things that you've done that you might not have noticed or that had an impact on so many of these people?
I think about it. I don't know about it, but I do
Mhm.
think about it. I think I have,
Right.
but I don't know. As I said, you spend a lot of time alone, and there's not too many people in the comic book world who um, who you get feedback from. You
Mhm.
know, you do the job. Even the editors, Victor, I adored him. I mean, he gave me work, but I would pitch the story, and usually he was too busy to talk. I'd pitch it. He goes, okay, go ahead, do it. Or, or I always wanted 24 pages for the Betty and Veronica because I thought I could really do a story. So I'd do the pitch, beginning, middle, end, and twist, and try to get it in as quick as possible before he hung up on me. And and then he would say, okay, do that in 6 pages. And I'd say, 6 pages? I need 24. But it's amazing how you can make those panels so important, each panel, that
Right.
you can do 6 pages instead of 24. But he would give me some books that were 24, but you don't get a lot of feedback. He was very busy.
Mhm.
And I would say that Karen Berger gave me a little feedback. Hildy, Hildy's very sweet. Every once in a while, I'd get flowers. Thank you for your work.
Mhm.
Every once in a while, I think once actually, but but you don't get a whole lot of. You have to really have it in yourself that you go, oh, this is a great story. But I could see especially with a 6 page story, that I would put it up on my bulletin board. And if I could read the whole thing without reading a word, if the illustrations, because I would draw, the stick figures. If I could just see by the layout the story without reading a single word, then I knew I had a good story. So that's why 2-year-olds can read comic books
Right.
and get the story, because they don't read the words, but it doesn't matter because the story, it tells a story. Just that's why comics and graphic novels, in my mind,
Mhm.
are so important for kids in the school system. And I think teachers have finally gotten that, reading those black and white pages, when I think they took away picture books in 3rd grade.
Mhm.
And so I remember all of a sudden, all I saw was words. Where are the pictures?
Right.
So it changed the way, I saw things, but now it's all, this is some students, teachers, the school system understands that some kids are readers and some kids are more visual. And that's, both of them are good.
That's true.
So I like to get those visual kids who really didn't have a chance.
Mhm. You mentioned the autobiography. Any other projects you're working on that fans can look forward to?
Besides well, I've become very political.
Mhm.
I've been doing, I did the Mueller report. I couldn't wait for that report to come out because I thought that would change everything.
Right.
But when it came out and it was so intense, the writing was so, even lawyers, lawyers could read it. But I remember thinking, which one of my fabulous friends is going to do a graphic novel about it, because it was so ripe for a graphic novel, because
Mhm.
it was so dense.
Mhm.
And then I thought, well, maybe I will. And so every day I posted a page. I read it, and it was really hard getting through, but I read it. Like I'd take 3 or 4 pages, maybe 2 pages, and read it over and over and over again. And then oh, I know what he's saying now. And then I try to make it into a page that was easy to read and fun to read.
Right.
And I can't say fun, but easy to read.
Easy to read.
And so I started posting on Twitter every day.
Mhm.
So when I went from like 250 followers almost overnight to 2,500. It kept, because people started following it.
Mhm.
And then I got a lot of uh, I sent it to the Congress, and it was I was very proud of it. But so that is something where I want libraries to have that book,
Mhm.
because kids should know that report. It was a very big report that just did not get enough attention.
Right.
So I did that, and then I did Cassidy, a comic book about Cassidy Hutchinson.
Okay.
And she was that girl who went on TV, and she was the first one to break through and say what she knew about the Trump
Yeah.
administration.
Mhm.
And so she was right in front of the Oval. She was right there near the Oval Office, so she knew everything. So I downloaded her report with Liz Cheney, and I used all the real dialogue, and I made it into a comic book. So I've done both of those things, which I'm very proud of.
Could you see putting that up there as a crowdfunding or a GoFundMe type project where people can back it and to get it out there to a large audience?
Yeah, we did a what is it? It wasn't a GoFundMe. What was it? Uh, yeah, we raised money, and
Mhm.
you know, um that I took to comic conventions, and I was able to make money from that.
Okay.
People were very interested in both of those
Mhm.
graphic novels.
That's awesome. Betty,
Yeah.
do you see yourself going that route again, either the Kickstarter, the GoFundMe for some of the projects that maybe, like you said, you have a lot of projects sitting there that really haven't seen the light of day yet, to put them out there as well?
I don't know. Once they're done, I
Right.
kind of done. If I had somebody to push them,
Mhm.
yeah, take them. They're yours, But I don't. I moved up to the country from Manhattan, and there, you know, when you're around and you're in the city, and all this inspiration is everywhere, you walk out the door.
Mhm.
But here in the country, it's like painstaking. There are cows and sheep, not sheep, but birds, and but I don't speak them. There's no eavesdropping here.
Right.
So I did not speak their language. So that was a period of time where I was like, what am I going to do? But I do a weekly column for the newspaper here, which
Okay.
is fun. It keeps me busy. It's called Let's Get Creative. And
Mhm.
they let me do anything I want to do. So that's fun.
Yeah. And we are back. Yes, I. This was a great interview. Barbara had so many wonderful tales to tell. I know for me personally, my wife loves Barbie, so for her to talk about the Barbie comics was a thrill for me, and I relayed that back to her. Um, her works are something that I think can be looked at throughout time, and it still relates to people nowadays as well. And that's really such a skill to do when you're a writer. So, Barbara, thank you so much for coming on. I hope you have you on again. Guys, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. And we will see you on Wednesday.